The cadets. Being noble rather than appearing as one, respecting other people's sorrow, labor, repose and peace, preserving the lineup and poise. Being a cadet is all about rules and traditions, almost a special life. And despite a tender age, it is absolutely not childish. This is the life which cadets live. Once on the riverside of Irtysh, in the courtyard of the Omsk Cadet Corps, a slim boy resembling a lakeside reed pointed to the yellow-blue infinite areas and said that he, Chokan Valikhanov, would once reach the yet unknown to him horizons and would attain the sky-blue mountains. Climbing to the tops, they glorified him and he educated them, the Omsk Cadet Corps. Chapter 1. Climbing to the top. Frost and sun, what a glorious day. This is true only for the first 10 minutes. Around this amount of time is needed to go from a fortress at the Tikhaya riverside is almost translated from the Turkic language to the palace square. The central building of the Cadet Corps is a heritage asset and also 2 centuries ground of history, in particular the Kazakh history. Initially, in 1813, our cadet corps was formed like a military school of the Siberian Cossack troops. In 1846, it became a cadet corps because the cadet corps was created using the facilities of the school, and so many outstanding people had graduated from it at different times. Even the atmosphere of our corps was imbued with the spirit of enlightenment, the spirit of education, including the school education. The cadet brotherhood was concentrated here, and such people as Chokan Valikhanov also studied here. Teachers often call second-year student Arkhat Kopturov as Valikhanov. He's the pride of the corps because he excels at physics, maths and humanities. In addition, he also comes from a military dynasty, just like Chokan Chingizovich.
Чингис Валиханов закончил казачье училище.
Chingiz Valikhanov graduated from the Cossack school in 1834. After that, he brought along to the cadet corps his proud-hearted and insubmissive son. Chokan was a restive boy, but you see, this child was a very fast learner and this still amazes everyone. When geniuses are born, their qualities show through since very early childhood days.
Они действительно себя вот с первых, наверное, дней, чуть ли не с пеленок показывают.
According to a family legend, the grandson of the great Ablai Khan started talking when he was a baby. He learned to read when he was 4, and at the age of 7 he started recording ethnic folklore in the Arabic. Around this time he received his first drawing lessons from field surveyors. His ink-based sketches were the first images of Kazakh prairie made by a steppe dweller. He possessed a natural gift of artistic flair. He had a sense of proportion, moderation and harmony. And these qualities were noticed and further developed in the cadet corps, because the place was a melting pot of the cream of intellectual society. The corps was called the hotbed of enlightenment. Everyone took notice of Valikhanov straight away. The only subject which he found difficult to comprehend was mathematics. In the rest of the disciplines, he was a prodigy and a teacher's pet. He was also simply a teenager with his worries and needs. This is the only letter preserved which the young cadet had written to his parents. With all my courage, I humbly ask your honor to turn your gaze of mercifulness to the situation and circumstances of the disheartened and dispirited son of yours and send some money to me. This would be the greatest favor because we, students, bear large expenses, for instance to buy papers, ink, for rewriting books and for sending letters to the post office and receiving them. Besides liberal arts, the corps also taught the basics of tactics, artillery and fortification. The cadets were taught gymnastics, horse riding and even singing. Drill walks with the orchestra around the city were regular practice. Certain enthusiasts could also master wood carving and learned how to drive in nails. Valikhanov and Potanin were among them.
По крайней мере, должны были их обучать этому.
They were supposed to learn all these things.
Это фотографии
These photos show that joiners' shops had already appeared back then.
столярные мастерские. Как и урок
Lessons of
танцев,
dances and fencing were also part of the curriculum.
было все обязательно.
A minute-by-minute schedule of life, with pre-dawn rises and breakfasts containing just a piece of brown crisscrossed bread. The standby officer threw the bread about the tables, leaving a quarter to each. Lessons lasted for 3 hours with a short break. A lunch included a traditional soup made of sour cabbage and porridge with butter. Another 3 hours of lessons were added in. On some lucky occasions for dinner, they would have a crunchy loaf of French bread, some rest and a bedtime routine. The beauty of the barrack life was very difficult for Chokan Valikhanov in the first few years at the Omsk Cadet Corps. His friend Grigory Potanin remembers. First off, it was all about hard barrack food and the savagery of having to wash with everyone else in a common bathhouse, and surely an early rise. Witness accounts show that Sultan Valikhanov would often throw a boot at an orderly man. This is why he was awoken with a certain degree of caution. Adaptation also played a role. First of all, it was a language barrier. However, when in Omsk, Chokan could speak perfect Russian, even much better than some native speakers. Fairy tales, which Potanin used to tell and Valikhanov retold, were of great use.
Сказки развивали речь,
Fairy tales developed speech, memory, and most interestingly, literacy. He made a beautiful speech. I learned in the Russian language and learned the Russian language, but what I have learned, I will give back to my nation.
народу.
Chapter 2. Growing Friendship. The aristocrat Chingizid and the son of a humble sergeant forged a friendship from the very first book, or to be more precise, from an exercise book, which was a thesis in ethnography. Grigory would record the stories of the Sultan in a big copybook as Chokan complemented the writings with the images of Kazakh homeware, weapons and animals. From then onwards, we became friends and our intellectual interests never separated ever since. We both had a shared interest in one and the same discipline, which was the Kyrgyz steppe and Central Asia. As Valikhanov and Potanin plodded away at the encyclopedia of the steppe life, the life in the courtyard of the Cadet Corps was simmering too. Ethnographers got into hot water as well. Cadets of the Omsk Cadet Corps were split into, so to speak, two castes, the squadron and the company troops. The squadron ones were the children of Cossack commanders, whereas the troop ones were the children of infantry officers or civil officials. The company troops were referred to as Europe, as they were deemed a privileged caste, whereas the squadron were called Asia and were leveled down. They lived accordingly on the lower floors, whereas the company troops lived on the upper floors. Despite Valikhanov's high blood, he was enlisted in the squadron troops together with Potanin. Some hard-hitting skirmishes were not so infrequent between the squadron and company troops. Potanin wrote about this in a politically correct manner by saying that Chokan taught us to be tolerant.
Он в одиночку даже
He would fight with the guy single-handedly. He had a spirit that he was the master of his life and he didn't care how many people there were in front of him. He would just insist on things being done his way. He was ironclad, especially in the beginning. He found it all difficult, and so there are records showing that life in the Cadet Corps was hard for him in the beginning. Then he started getting used to it. He grasped the system and the way people live here, how people learn.
систему, как здесь живут, как учатся и как вот все-таки вот это вот
But
повиновение.
finally obedience got the best of it because it was a military system and one had to stick to the rules. War games resembling school military drills were held once in a while. For example, such war games were themed to describe the conquest of Siberia, and the squadron troops reconstructed the image of Kuchum's warriors who had been defeated by Yermak, whereas company troops acted out the role of chieftains vigilantes. Chokan Valikhanov was accordingly in the Khan's horde. The prisoners were held in water closets. Victory was ferociously contested from either side, as hamburgers and bread were often at stake. The settlement was conducted there and then during lunch or dinner. Europe or the company troops had a different uniform with double-breasted frock coats and platoon helmets with the plumes. The squadron attire was simpler, but instead the lower floors were much friendly and more drawn together. However, the position of the elders was equal both beneath and above. They were the dominant power in the rooms. You can't really say that this was a humiliating treatment of juniors. I would rather say that this was manly upbringing and being men among themselves. It's not really a harassment of subordinates. For instance, there was a rule that third-year students had to protect first-timers. Speaking clearly, laconically and to the point quickly becomes a habit in these places. We observe some unspoken rules. We don't eat sneakily because one has to share their food with the rest. Upon arrival from a discharge, one could bring something over by request. In general, there are many rules, but order remains and was in the 19th century the most important precept. Beds had to stand in a row without a single crease on a bedspread, sketchboards on the shelves, quarters standing toe-to-toe, and even the uniform hanging in the wardrobe was an impeccable arrangement. 7 minutes were given to get prepared for the following classes, more than enough to grab textbooks, copybooks and pens and rush off to studies. Any questions? Negative, sir. Chapter 3. A lifelong brotherhood. They were rushing down to make history through worn-to-tatters steps along the highly polished handrails. We're walking in the same classrooms and go down the same stairways. We visit the very same building where such people once studied. Surely this staircase remembers the steps of a student of Siberian Cossack school, Chingiz Valikhanov, and the cadet Chokan Valikhanov. This staircase was built in 1826. Cadets of the present are now walking along this very staircase. The initiation stage is now behind for Chokan. Haughty sultan befitting silence and scuffles are a thing of the past now. The first strongman depriving friends of delicacies was overthrown by the derision of a Cossack prince. From the second year, Chokan was a recognized leader. He's asked to give advice, especially in matters concerning honor. He's particularly loved in the corps, both 2 centuries ago and now. For the cadets, he was a role model worth emulating. We hold him up as an example not only as an outstanding figure, but also as a person who showed himself as a versatile scientist and a statesman. The scientist was 14 at the time. Just 2 years after entering the school, he started deciphering Turkic terms for Professor Beryozin's thesis on the Khan's marks of Tohtamish. The doors of all libraries were now open for Chokan, including the doors of teachers' libraries. Even in the archives, he's allowed to borrow books and take them home. Many people there saw him as a rough diamond. He grasped everything on the fly. Potanin could not recognize his friend, and where that explosive Tsarevich had vanished, who treated studies with an air-evasion, aristocratic nonchalance. In the last year, science became the cause of his life. They dream about travels in the depths of Asia. They generally dreamed a lot. After graduation, destiny separated them, but it didn't affect their relations. The cadet brotherhood lasted their whole lives. Once upon a time, my late friend Chokan Valikhanov and I started dreaming for the first time about the work which I had to do myself because my friend had died so prematurely. But I'm confident that if he had implemented all the tasks which we had outlined, he would have been able to create a dominant name for himself. I did everything I could without backtracking from the original course, which we had together designed at some point.